Evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Watson, Metro PD. We need to speak with you about a narcotics investigation. Can I see some identification?
You already know who I am. DEA Special Agent Jones. What's this about?
We received intel pointing to traffic coming through this residence. We're going to need to come inside and have a look around.
Do you have a warrant?
Not at this time, ma'am, but the tip's solid.
On the evening of February 11th, 2024, at approximately 6:44 p.m., 3 officers from a suburban police department's narcotics unit arrived at a single-family residence in response to a tip alleging narcotics trafficking. The body cam footage begins as Officer Jay Watson, an 8-year veteran with specialized narcotics training, exits his patrol vehicle and approaches the front door. The residence is well maintained. The neighborhood is quiet. Nothing visible suggests criminal activity. Watson is accompanied by 2 additional officers, standard protocol for narcotics calls. What the officers expected to find was evidence of illegal distribution. What the body cam captures instead is a federal law enforcement agent standing in her doorway, badge displayed, asserting her rights, and the chain of decisions that follows becomes a case study in authority, constitutional boundaries, and the consequences of procedural failure. Before we go further, if you value objective body cam analysis and clear breakdowns of constitutional policing, take a moment to support the channel by liking this video and subscribing. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always interested to see how far these cases reach. The encounter begins with the information that brought officers to this address. 2 hours earlier, Officer Watson received a tip from a confidential informant who had provided reliable information in at least 3 prior investigations, resulting in arrests. The informant reported regular foot traffic at a specific address, suspected narcotics distribution, activity patterns consistent with what investigators call a stash house, brief visits, exchanges at the door, irregular timing throughout the day. The detail was sufficient for Watson to consider it actionable. He documented the tip and ran a preliminary database check. The address showed no prior narcotics incidents, but the informant's track record gave Watson confidence. This is standard procedure. Informants are rated on reliability. A credible source with a proven history carries weight. But there's a critical step Watson did not take: independent corroboration. No surveillance, no additional intelligence, no attempt to verify the address through secondary sources. The tip alone became the foundation for the response. This would later be identified as the first failure point. The body cam footage shows Watson approaching the front door at 6:44 p.m. Before he knocks, the door opens. Standing in the threshold is a black woman in her late 30s wearing casual clothing. Around her neck, clearly visible in the porch lighting, is a gold federal badge. Watson introduces himself and states the reason for the call. The audio is clear. He tells her the department received information about narcotics trafficking at this location. The woman responds immediately. Her voice is calm, measured, professional. She identifies herself as DEA Special Agent Keisha Jones and asks what specific investigation brought them to her door. Watson repeats that they have solid intelligence. Jones asks a direct question: do they have a warrant? Watson says no, but the information is credible and they need to enter and look around. This is where the encounter shifts legally. Under the Fourth Amendment, warrantless entry into a home requires more than probable cause. It requires exigent circumstances, imminent danger, destruction of evidence, hot pursuit of a suspect. Watson's response suggests he believes the tip alone justifies entry. It does not. Jones asks again if they have a warrant. The body cam angle shows her standing firm in the doorway, badge still visible. Watson does not have a warrant. He tells her they're going to conduct a protective sweep. Jones responds that without a warrant, they will not be entering her home. The footage captures the standoff: 3 officers on the porch, 1 federal agent in the doorway, and a growing tension rooted in conflicting interpretations of authority. Watson presses further. He states they have solid intelligence and need to verify there's no illegal activity. Jones repeats they need a warrant. This exchange continues for several minutes. The body cam shows Watson and the 2 other officers positioned at the threshold, attempting to peer inside. Jones shifts her stance slightly, blocking the sightline. Her tone remains professional. She does not shout, she does not threaten. She asserts her constitutional right to refuse entry. The legal principle is straightforward. Absent consent, a warrant, or exigent circumstances, police cannot enter a home. None of those exceptions exist here. Jones has not consented. There is no warrant. There is no emergency. What Watson has is an informant's tip which may establish reasonable suspicion or even probable cause for further investigation, but it does not authorize crossing the threshold of a private residence. At approximately 7 minutes into the footage, Watson makes a decision that defines the remainder of the encounter. He informs Agent Jones she is being detained for officer safety while they investigate further. This is the moment officer discretion crosses into detention. Detention requires reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Jones asks on what legal grounds she is being detained. Watson states the tip justifies their presence and her refusal to cooperate raises concerns. Jones responds that she is a federal agent in her own home and they have no authority to detain her without probable cause. She asks if she is under arrest. Watson says she is being detained, not arrested. Jones asks what crime she is suspected of committing. The Bodycam audio captures Watson's non-response. He does not articulate a specific crime. Instead, he instructs Jones to step outside onto the porch. Jones refuses. Watson repeats the instruction. The footage shows him reaching toward her arm. Jones verbally protests, stating clearly that Watson has no legal authority to touch her and that he is violating her Fourth Amendment rights. She does not physically resist, but her verbal assertion is unambiguous. Watson, with assistance from one of the other officers, guides her out onto the porch. The body cam captures her repeated statements. She does not consent to any search. The officers are acting unlawfully. She is a federal agent being unlawfully detained. One of the officers asks Watson if they should call a supervisor. Watson says they will after they secure the scene. The concept of securing a scene typically applies when officer safety is genuinely at risk or evidence might be destroyed. Neither condition exists here. The residence is quiet. Jones is not armed in a threatening manner, not behaving erratically, and has identified herself as law enforcement. The decision to detain her appears driven by Watson's unwillingness to accept her refusal rather than any articulable safety concern. This distinction matters. Officer safety is a legitimate consideration in policing, but it cannot be invoked as blanket justification for detention without specific, observable facts supporting the concern. At 13 minutes into the encounter, one of the officers asks Jones where she works. She states she is assigned to the DEA field office downtown. He asks for credentials. Jones tells him her badge is around her neck and her full credentials are inside. He asks if she can retrieve them. The body cam captures her response. She cannot do so while being unlawfully detained. This creates a procedural impasse. The officers want proof beyond the badge, but their own detention prevents her from accessing her home. The circular logic underscores the fundamental problem. The detention itself lacks legal foundation. Watson radios for a supervisor. At 18 minutes, a sergeant arrives. The body cam footage shows him exiting his vehicle, speaking briefly with Watson near the patrol cars, then approaching the porch. He asks Jones to identify herself. Jones, maintaining composure despite having been detained for nearly 20 minutes, repeats that she is DEA Special Agent Keisha Jones and that she has been unlawfully detained. The sergeant asks to see credentials. Jones states they are inside and asks if she is free to retrieve them. The sergeant instructs Watson to release her. Watson begins to explain the informant tip. The sergeant cuts him off. This is where supervisory oversight becomes critical. The sergeant recognizes what Watson should have understood from the beginning. Regardless of the tip, there is no legal basis to detain a federal agent in her home without a warrant or exigent circumstances. Jones goes inside, retrieves her credentials, and returns. The body cam captures the credentials clearly. DEA Special Agent, Federal Shield, nearly 15 years of service. The sergeant examines them, returns them, and orders his officers to clear the scene. The footage shows the officers retreating to their vehicles. Jones remains on her porch, expressionless, watching them leave. The violation is complete. She was detained without reasonable suspicion, subjected to physical contact despite asserting her rights, and prevented from freely accessing her own home. The legal analysis here is not complex. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Detention is a seizure. It requires reasonable suspicion that the person detained has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime. Jones did none of those things. Even if she had not been a federal agent, even if she had been a private citizen, the constitutional violation would be identical. The fact that she is DEA adds a jurisdictional dimension but does not change the underlying legal failure. Following the incident, Jones filed formal complaints with both the police department and DEA leadership. An internal affairs investigation was initiated. Investigators reviewed the Bodycam footage frame by frame. They re-examined the informant tip. What they discovered deepened the failure. The informant had transposed numbers in the address. The tip was for a similar address 2 blocks away, a location with documented narcotics history. The informant's reliability remained intact, but the information in this instance was wrong. Watson had not verified the address independently. He had not conducted surveillance. He had not sought a warrant despite having 2 hours to do so. He acted on the tip alone. The investigation examined whether Watson violated department policy and constitutional standards. The findings were clear. Detention without reasonable suspicion violates the Fourth Amendment. Attempting to search or enter a residence without a warrant or exigent circumstances violates the Fourth Amendment. Physically detaining Agent Jones, despite her identification and assertion of rights, was unsupported by policy or law. The 2 accompanying officers were also reviewed. One had suggested calling a supervisor, indicating some awareness the situation was problematic, but neither intervened to stop the detention. The question of why Jones' identification was insufficient is central. Federal badges are standardized. Officers receive training on recognizing credentials from other agencies. Jones was not evasive. She stated her identity clearly and repeatedly. Her badge was visible. Yet the officers proceeded as though her credibility required additional proof. The investigation noted this raised questions about implicit bias. Research indicates that authority figures from marginalized communities, particularly Black women, face heightened skepticism when asserting authority. While the investigation could not prove bias motivated the actions, it documented that the decision to detain a clearly identified federal agent without cause warranted examination of the factors influencing judgment. Jurisdictional issues compounded the problem. DEA operates under federal authority, with primacy in narcotics enforcement. Local departments cooperate through task forces and intelligence sharing. Detaining a federal agent damages those relationships. The DEA office issued a formal statement expressing concern and requesting full accountability. The police chief met with DEA leadership to discuss findings and corrective measures. Public response divided along predictable lines. Civil rights organizations cited the case as evidence of overreach and questioned whether Jones would have been treated similarly if she were not a Black woman. Police advocacy groups argued Watson acted in good faith on credible information. Legal scholars noted that good faith does not excuse constitutional violations, particularly when rights are clearly asserted. The internal investigation resulted in disciplinary action. Watson was found to have violated department policy and constitutional law. He received suspension without pay and mandatory remedial training on Fourth Amendment principles, detention authority, and de-escalation. The 2 accompanying officers received written reprimands. The sergeant was cleared, his actions demonstrating appropriate judgment. The informant was removed from active use due to the address error. After departmental review, The chief recommended termination. The police commission upheld it. Watson was discharged. The decision was based not on a single mistake, but on cumulative assessment. His judgment reflected fundamental misunderstanding of constitutional limits and unwillingness to accept correction when those limits were articulated by the person whose rights he was violating. The two other officers remained employed, but were transferred from narcotics pending additional training. This case illustrates how procedural failures converge to produce serious violations. The informant tip appeared credible, but was not independently verified. The decision to proceed without a warrant was legally unsupportable. The choice to detain Jones, despite clear identification, reflected failure to recognize boundaries of police authority. It underscores the need for training that fosters critical thinking about when and how authority may be exercised, not just rote legal standards. Interagency coordination depends on mutual respect and jurisdictional recognition. When local officers unlawfully detain a federal agent, trust erodes and cooperation suffers. Constitutional safeguards protect all individuals, but effectiveness depends on officers honoring them even when doing so conflicts with immediate objectives. The badge at the door should have ended the encounter. It did not. The consequences extended beyond one evening, affecting careers, interagency relationships, and public confidence in systems meant to uphold both safety and rights. Subscribe for more detailed body cam analysis and constitutional breakdowns. We focus on the footage, the law, and the decisions that shape both.